Hello and welcome to the second video on higher education system. In our previous video, we looked at education in ancient India. In this video, we are going to focus primarily on the evolution of higher learning and research in the last 70 years of India's independence. So in this video, I'll primarily focus on the types of institutions. We will look at the growth of higher education post-independence, and we'll also look at a lot of initiatives and important committees and commissions that were taken after independence. So let's get started. First, I would like to bring your attention to the types of educational institutes, because sometimes there have been some questions in previous UGC NET papers as to what is the difference between these different types of institutes. So there are two broad definitions. One category is the universities and the university level institutions, and under that there are various other categories. So for example, one is central universities. So what are central universities? It's universities that are managed and funded by the Indian government. That is, curriculum across all the 49 central universities is the same in all the country. Second, state universities. Now state universities, as you can see, they are managed and funded by the respective state governments, but obviously because these are funded by states, so the curriculum and examination patterns will vary depending on each state. Institutes of national importance are really the private institutions which have gained national importance because of their impeccable curriculum, academic standards. They are very reputable, highly competitive, internationally recognized. These are institutes of national importance. Then fourth category under this university level institutions is the deemed to be universities. These could be colleges and private institutions which are really recognized for their high caliber education, and that's why they are deemed to be universities. Now the status of deemed university grants them full autonomy with respect to they can set their own curriculum, their own admission requirements, and the programs and requirements may vary among these different deemed universities. The other type of category apart from the universities is the college category. Now under colleges there are two types of categories. One is affiliated colleges. So the vast majority of colleges you see in our country are really the affiliated colleges which are affiliated to a particular university. It could be Bangalore University, Delhi University, and what they have to do is they have to sort of follow the university's curriculum, the examination structure, and the grading protocol. Whereas an autonomous college they are just overseen by universities, but they operate under a different protocol, and what they can do is they can set their own curriculum and their own admission requirements. So these are the different types of educational institutes that you will come across. Now let's look at the growth of higher education. So if you talk about the institutions in our country right before independence, so the first technical institute in Asia was really the Roorkee University, which was set up in 1847, the IIT Roorkee, which is now IIT today, IIT Roorkee in 1847. And really the first college, if you have to say the first college in India, was the Serampore College in Bengal, which was in 1918. But after that, after independence, you would see that there has been a phenomenal growth in the higher education space. So if you look at some data, let's say if you were to compare of let's say 1950 data, so in 1950 you had about 30 universities only. In fact, in 1947 there were only about 19 universities, but 1950 had 30 universities and around 700, in fact 695 were the number of institutes or colleges at that time. But let's look at the growth. So they have grown really at a CAGR of 10 to 12%. So today the number of universities in our country are 903 universities, 39,000 plus colleges, and 10,000 plus standalone institutions. And this is on the MHRD website by the AISHE latest report of 2017-18. So this is really the number in case these numbers are asked. Also, if you look at the total enrollment in higher education, there were only about 3.5 lakh students that were enrolled in our institutions of higher learning in 1950, but you can see now we have 3.6 crores, that means 36.6 million students are right now enrolled in our higher education system, and girls constitute about 47.6% of this number. Gross enrollment ratio, that is between the age of 18 to 23, how many people are enrolled in our higher education institutes. So approximately 25.8 This is our gross enrollment ratio, and the focus is really in the next few years to take it to 30. And for male population this is 26.3, for females it is 25.4. Also, if you look at the pupil teacher ratio, that means how many students have one teacher, or how many teachers are there per number of students. So this PTR in universities and colleges, considering the regular mode, is really 30. That means for every 30 students there is one teacher. This is the ratio, the PTR. But in the universities and its constituent units, it is around 20, right, for regular mode. And this is all as on the MHRD website as per the latest report of 2017-2018. If you look at the number of teachers, there were only about 15,000 teachers in 1950. Today that number is close to 12,84,000 something. So you can see the growth has been really phenomenal, and in fact today India is the third largest higher education system in the world after US and China. So while our higher education system is really huge in terms of its size and really diverse, but I think a lot of work needs to be done in terms of the quality of education that is imparted. So US is the biggest, but also the considered as the top higher education system in the world, whereas India's rank is very, very low. Okay, so now let's look at what were the initiatives, right? What were the different initiatives that were taken post independence to make sure that the system of education, right, higher education or secondary education, how is it aligning with the country's development? So the first initiative or the committee that was taken up was really the University Education Commission. It was also known as the Radhakrishnan Commission. This was around 1948, 1949. So soon after independence, this was really the first commission that was taken, and it studied the university education and said, okay, when we look at university education, is it doing its job? I mean, what is really the aim and objective of university education, and what is the state of university education today? And it had given a lot of recommendations and was very holistic in terms of its recommendations. So it looked at one, educational standards, whether the education quality, that means the quality of pedagogy, how good it is, right? How is the entry of students taken? What about the medium of instruction? Is everything in English, or are we also promoting a regional language? Because that's very important. So it said, how do we make sure that the medium of instructions is catered as per the state? And also it did focus on moral instructions, that how do we include really value education in our educational institute? How do they become good citizens of the country and the world, students who are enrolled in our higher ed systems? It also hinted about introducing UGC. It gave recommendations that we should start a regulatory body like UGC. It also talked about starting universities, the rural universities in rural areas for rural people, and also looked at women education, right? So they say that if you educate a man, you educate an individual, but a woman, you educate the society. So it really understood the importance of women education and said, how can we make sure that we are including women, right, in today's university education, and real focus on their education. So this was the first commission. The second commission after this was the Mudaliar Commission, which was in 1952 to 1953, and this was popularly known as the Secondary Education Commission. And why secondary education? Because it also looked at the secondary education. So it said, if you look at leadership, if you look at the whole education system, the weak link really is the secondary education. That means here is where we should see what the issues are, because if here we don't focus on the student, they will not go ahead and become really leaders of tomorrow. So it said, how do we make sure that we look at secondary education, reorganize it and improve it? So it looked at that, and a couple of recommendations that this commission gave was about democratic citizenship, right? And in fact, the first education minister of our country, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, he suggested, saying that we are a democratic setup and we should uphold the values of democracy. And how do we develop our citizens so that they are not just understanding the theoretical part, but also becoming good democratic citizens of this country. It also laid emphasis on the improvement of vocational efficiency. That means at that time it was very urgent and also important to really increase our national income. So we said, how do we make sure that education is not isolated. That means it is not isolated from the real day-to-day world. So ultimately, how do we enable that people also we are enabling people so that they can do their jobs and they can contribute towards the productivity of the nation and thus increase the national income of our country. It was also about holistic personality development, meaning not just one two aspects but how you're grooming the entire personality of an individual. So these were the first two commissions. After this was the third commission, and this was Kothari Commission. Now this was really one of the most talked about commission. This was very progressive in nature, and this was also very unique in terms of studying the education system, because it did not focus on only on one aspect of, let's say, secondary education or university education. It looked at the education from primary level to the highest education, and it said that, and it was really led by the then chairman of UGC, Daulat Singh Kothari, who said you have to have a standardized national pattern of education, and the various recommendations given were one like in line with the previous one: increase in productivity or national income and vocational efficiency. It said, can we have a standardized pattern across the states of 10 plus 2 plus 3 years of education? It also talked about being a science-based society, because science and technology was growing, and it said, how do we focus on science and we can become a more science-based organization? It focused on promoting social and national integration. It encouraged the flexible education like the distance education. It also suggested that in fact education is so important and primary that in fact 6% of the national income should really be spent on education. So this was really a progressive commission in those times, and in fact a lot of suggestions that were given from Mr. Kothari and his team were incorporated in really the national policy of education during Indira Gandhi's reign, so and Rajiv Gandhi's reign. So national policy of education 1968 and then 1986. So now this national policy of education was really the central government saying that, okay, how do we look at the quality of education, how do we improve the quality of education, and how do we provide this quality education to all the citizens of this country? So it suggested that 6% of our national income to be spent on education, recommendations from here. It also said that we should provide free and compulsory education for all children up till age of 14. And today you would see that in the last few years, right, a lot of schools have to admit students, right, who are from a lower status, so to make sure that we also give them the equal right to be a part of this country and to educate them. It was about education opportunity for all, like we said, like up till age of 14 everyone, uniform education structure. It also focused on the education of teachers. It focused on language development. And in fact, this was also revised in 1992, the National Policy on Education. And 1992, I think the key in one word, I would say it was about equality. So what it said was, we are doing a lot of things, but how do we make sure that we are having female teachers? How do we make sure that we are checking the progress, the educational progress of the SC and the ST population, right? How do we make sure that we as a country are growing all together? Rather than really some sections of the society, be it women or certain other sections, who are not growing as far. So that's what your national policy of education was. Right now there is work underway, and I think we will very soon see the latest national policy of education. Okay, next commission was the Sam Pitroda Committee. This was in 2007. It was also known as the National Knowledge Commission, and the objective was transform India into a knowledge society. So it was about how do we promote research and innovation, how do we facilitate knowledge application in various sectors like health, agriculture, industry. It also focused a lot on interactions between knowledge systems in the global arena, not just India, but can we look at global universities? Can we in fact allow the global universities to set up their shop in India? And it also recommended starting an independent regulatory authority by doing away with all the other authorities called IRAHE, right, one body. And this was the Sam Pitroda Committee. Following the Sam Pitroda Committee was the Yashpal Committee in 2009, where they said the focus should be on the idea of university, and we need to make some major structural changes. So it looked at the quality of the institutes and universities, and in fact gave some very sweeping suggestions, like deemed the university status should be abandoned. So they said, if a university deserves to be a university, let's make it a full-fledged university, or scrap it. So these were the suggestions, but it said no deemed university in between. It also said that the affiliation of colleges should not be on university, and they should not bother themselves with all these things, but you could have an exam like a GRE, right, which is done in other countries, right, so for purpose of university education. It also did say that we should scrap all the higher education regulatory monitoring bodies and create a super regulator called CHER. So this was the Yashpal Committee of 2009. So that's it for this video. We looked at in this video the growth of education, higher education after independence. We looked at the various initiatives that were taken, including the national policy on education. So thanks for watching the video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video, where I will talk about the regulatory bodies in higher education and a few rankings.